The newest Star Wars show, The Acolyte, just had its 2-episode premiere. I'll give my full thoughts, theorize on some future plot lines, and more on today's spoiler-filled video. To reiterate, spoiler-filled. If you haven't watched this one and you don't want to know the plot beforehand, click away now. So, what were my overall thoughts on The Acolyte? Well, the lead-up to the show is interesting. The screening was like late last month. Social media reactions came out around that time, so people have been talking about this show for a while, and maybe that's part of the reason why I didn't find myself very surprised when I watched the 2 episodes. The theories that I had going in, specifically regarding the death of Master Indara and the twin connection with May and Osha, they turned out to be correct. And so far the plot hasn't really had that surprising turn or that pull I've been waiting for. May is killing Jedi, she's an acolyte being trained under some Darksider. She's got a twin sister, the Jedi are hunting her down. It's kind of what I expected. And that might be the weakest element so far for me, right now anyway. That hook that really makes me want to tune into episode 3 and beyond isn't there. That's not to say I didn't like what I watched. I did, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do think, again, I've said this so many times, this is one of the weaknesses of making your shows 8-part movies. I was talking about this on Twitter yesterday. Star Wars, it feels like it still hasn't had a true live-action TV show aside from maybe Andor. It puts out a 6-hour movie in 8 parts, and I feel like sometimes the pacing suffers because of that, as do other elements like characterization. We need longer seasons designed as TV shows, but that's a rant for another day. My other issue with this show, and again, I will be getting into the positives, don't worry, it's just not very nice to look at sometimes. It's not as bad as, like, Kenobi, but some of the lighting choices, for example, don't work in the show's favor, and I also feel like Disney Plus isn't putting it out on its best foot. This is actually something I saw from other people watching as well. Especially if you're on browser, it seems like the show is just not looking very nice. It looks a little fuzzy or grainy. Maybe it's the compression, I don't know, but it's disappointing because they clearly spent a lot of money on these big practical sets with lots of Star Wars things in them. This has been a consistent issue, volume or not. Disney Plus needs better when it comes to presenting their shows, especially if they are going to be in this quasi-movie format. Like, look how good the key art for the show looks. Anyway, when it comes to positives, there's also a lot to talk about. The big standout for me so far, characters and action. The initial fight between Master Indara and May did a great job of setting the tone, as did the hand-to-hand combat between Saul and May in episode 2. Like, you get the real idea that these Jedi, when empowered by the Force, are just on a different level. I thought the portrayal of the Jedi as a whole was also really interesting. Saul is sort of operating a bit like a Qui-Gon Jinn character, where he's obviously a Jedi at heart, but he probably has a bit more flexibility with rules. I mean, he's definitely got some attachment issues for a Jedi. He doesn't want to come back to Coruscant and discuss the path forward in episode 2. He wants to remain on the hunt, and it makes for a compelling character. He's also got a warmness to him that Jedi often just don't have. And he contrasts nicely with Vernestra Rwoh, who I'm sure High Republic fans are very happy to see on the small screen. The locations generally were also usually good, at least. Like, you can tell they're not using the volume, and it gives them a lot more room to work with, and I mean that literally. They're not running against the hard camera wall that they did in Kenobi, for example. But sometimes the sets did feel, it's hard to explain, they almost feel like they're out of a theme park. Like Galaxy's Edge, which is trying to ape Star Wars rather than an actual Star Wars production. I don't really know how to put my finger on it. I felt it most when Osha was on the ship, but we'll move on. Nice to see Neimoidians again, at least. And we get a little look at the world building of this era of the galaxy, which is hopefully something that continues to get fleshed out. I want to see more of the Republic. I want to know who the Chancellor is. Is it someone related to, like, Valorum? That might be appropriate to start out of the Republic already. It's like falling into the hands of the elite, but we'll see. What we did get was really cool. Coruscant is obviously in a pre-prequel stage where it's not fully built up yet. You see a Jedi starfighter of the High Republic era, which is known as a Vector. But again, it's not a vector quite like it existed in the High Republic. The layout's slightly different. But yeah, let's talk about the central mystery here. And we'll sum up what we know. Some sort of disaster, it's referred to specifically as a fire, happened during May and Osha's childhood, where the twins presumed the other to be dead, and Osha was taken to the Jedi for training. She dropped out, is working basically as a mechanic, a living astromech sort of on ships. And May, who has found herself under the control or training of a Darksider, is on a mission to kill several Jedi. What's interesting, however, and we get this in episode 2, is that her mission clearly is more than just something she's doing because of some inner desire. This was handed down to her by her master. Seems like she needs to accomplish these killings to progress to the next stage of her training, while also having to follow certain commands, like she has got to kill one Jedi unarmed. And she's also partnering with, I think his name is Kamir, Manny Jacinto's character, who's providing her support along the way. Now, this is where my crazy theory comes in. We know that May has not seen her master, who presumably is that toothy Sith Lord, without his mask on. She doesn't know his true identity. My guess is that he is, in fact, Manny Jacinto's character, Kamir. And I think that's why he's encouraging her to, for example, use poisons, because that's what a Sith of that era would want to do. The Sith are in hiding. They can't openly act against the Jedi. Subterfuge, cleverness, those are their tools right now versus outright assaults. Her job isn't to follow some strict commandment. That's what the Jedi do. A Sith needs to do whatever to accomplish their goal. And we also see that Kamir seems to have a particular knowledge and hatred for the Jedi himself. So yeah, I think that's probably going to be one of the big reveals of this season. But keep in mind, whoever that Sith is, he's not the true big dog right now, because May is an acolyte. She's not the apprentice. Her master would be the apprentice in the rule of two situation. Now, perhaps he's molding her to move up in Sith training, at which point he'll have to take action against his master. But there's a greater power in the galaxy right now who is even further in the shadows, and I think that's one of the most compelling aspects of this season. You know, we're like 100 years out from the Phantom Menace, so I want to see how the actions of the Sith, and again, I'm still assuming that her master is a Sith and not just some dark side practitioner, prepare the galaxy for Palpatine's eventual destruction of the Jedi. We're probably not talking about Darth Plagueis, but maybe Plagueis' master or Plagueis' master's master. Will the master of the Acolyte succeed in overturning their master? Maybe that Sith is already dead, or maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the Acolyte is being trained by a powerful Sith Lord to replace a poor apprentice. All of these things we don't know. But that's all for me today, guys. I just want to end by saying I really liked the droids which turned into chairs on the Republic prison ship. That was fun. I also liked that cyborg dude. Pretty creepy. But let me know your thoughts, of course, on the show and more down below.